All right. The wheels are turning, and I believe we are now live on Facebook. So I'm going to get us started. I have slides to share as usual. Just give me a moment to share that. All right. And I need to get my chat back so I can see what's going on here. And if I could just get some folks in the chat, just confirm that you can still hear me okay and that you can see the slides, and then we'll get moving. Wonderful. Okay, excellent. Really appreciate it. And away we go. So just to clarify, today's session is about how I market my stuff. And before I get into the mechanics of that, I want to explain the sorts of things that I'm marketing. And that, of course, ties into where my income comes from, because the things you earn money from are generally the things that you're talking about and that you're marketing. So I'm marketing online classes. I'm marketing consulting and services, which is mainly things like editing, like book proposal editing, hourly consulting. I used to do query letter critiques as well, but I've since stopped that. I have a paid newsletter called The Hot Sheet. I've got speaking income, although that's been, and here I'm referring to live events, in-person events, but of course that's really dwindled during the pandemic, and it has shifted really more over into what I would call online teaching and online classes. I've also got the books on the market. I've got 2 books out. I've got some freelance writing that I do. I collect royalties on a course I did with the Great Courses. And then I also have a free newsletter called Electric Speed, which gives me advertising income. So people pay to advertise in that newsletter. So that's a little bit on top of everything else. So next, I want to explain the different ways that I make people aware of these services. Now, before I get into the nitty-gritty, what you should know is that I've been in business a long time now, and so that gives me some inherent advantages. I started working in book publishing in the late 90s. I was associated with Writer's Digest for many years. I left Writer's Digest in 2010. I've also worked for the Virginia Quarterly Review. I've had a website and a blog for a decade now. So all of these things give me quite a platform that makes everything else easier. But of course, I've been building that platform proactively. I established my website in 2005. I started blogging in 2008. So all of these things, have been grown over time, and I'm kind of bypassing that piece of it. I've actually addressed a lot of it in earlier Sunday sermons. If you're curious, you can go back and look at some of those formative years. So I'm going to focus on how I market today, given some of the tools and the assets that I have. So the most important marketing tool by far is email. And if you talk to any professional author or anyone, especially a self-published author, they're going to tell you probably the same, that email is where their most devoted fans are. It's where they can actually have the hard sell, and it works. So right now, what I have on the slide is just a really brief description of some of the email lists that I use. So I've got an email list for people who are interested in the classes, and it's primarily made up of past students. So people who've taken a class with me before get emails about upcoming classes. I've got a free email newsletter called Electric Speed. As you can see, the numbers there indicate the size of the list. So that goes out to more than 36,000 people. I've been building that list since 2009. And it didn't even surpass 2,000 people until roughly 2015. So it's only in the last, say, 5 or 6 years that it's really become a list of ginormous size. And I'm going to explain how it got that big a little bit later. So I use that. I also have 2 emails that go out that are just delivering my blog posts. So I'm a blogger. I have a lot of guests who blog at my site as well at janefriedman.com. And people can sign up either for the daily, which means they get the full blog post as soon as it's posted in the morning, or they get the weekly digest, which is very short and just summarizes what new content appeared at my site in the previous 7 days. These are automated emails. I don't really touch them. They just grab the content from my site, assemble it, and then shoot it out to the people who asked for those updates. So you can see again that the numbers there are, I've got about 4,500 on the online class updates. I've got the 36,000 on electric speed, which is free. I've got the daily that goes out to almost 3,000, and then the weekly that goes out to about 3,500. And there's some overlap in here. So there's some people who subscribe to multiple emails from me, and it's up to them. They can unsubscribe from any of these, but this is how I mainly stay in touch with people. Now, on those blog post emails, I do something very specific to market classes. As you saw earlier, classes are about 1/3 of my income currently. So it's really important for me to make people aware that those classes exist. So I always tout the upcoming online class at the opening of the daily send. And then at the end of that send, I have a list of all of the classes that are upcoming. Now, if you look at the metrics of this, not a whole lot of people are actually clicking on that, but it's not that important to me that I make a sale off of these mentions. It's mainly to build awareness and keep people informed that I am offering classes. Electric speed, because of the size of the list, it's a much more important factor in marketing the classes as well as some of the other things that I do. So if you're not familiar with electric speed, this is something I send out every 2 weeks. It focuses on digital tools and resources for writers. I open it up with a little bit of a personal story or some sort of more personal observation. And then I go into like 4 tools usually that I've recently discovered and that I recommend for writers. And then it segues into a mention of the upcoming online class, free resources that I have available. And then, like the daily blog digest and the weekly blog digest, I end it with a list of all of the upcoming classes. There's also an advertisement that appears in Electric Speed. It's an issue sponsor. So that appears actually before the promotion for the online class. So I've got double duty going on here. I'm not only marketing my classes in this newsletter, but I'm earning some money from the advertising as well. Now I'm on a email marketing service called Active Campaign. And actually my next Sunday sermon in May is going to focus on how I switched from MailChimp, which I'd been using since, 2010, maybe, how I moved from MailChimp to Active Campaign, what that process was like, and why I switched. So right now you're looking at a screen capture from inside my Active Campaign dashboard that's showing me the newsletters that I've recently sent, how many people they were sent to in the first column. And then in the column that I've boxed in red, that's Active Campaign trying to guess, and it's a pretty good guess, at how much money that newsletter earned for me. And that's because I have e-commerce integration set up with my Active Campaign list, and which I'll show you if you come to my sermon next month. And so it's trying to calculate the class registrations that have occurred as a result of sending this email. So this is super helpful. And you can see obviously that there's a really significant dollar amount tied to one email in particular. It's the one that's titled Roz Morris Advanced Self-Editing. So that was an email that was sent specifically to the people subscribing to my online class updates. That's purely a marketing email. There's no editorial content. There's no blog posts. It's strictly, hey, here are the new classes coming up that I think you might be interested in. And as you can see, it's the best earning it is every single time of any email that I send, because it's people who've taken classes with me before and they're highly engaged and they're interested in what's coming next. So that has the highest dollar amount, and the others are lower. You can see Electric Speed isn't a very high number at the one that we have captured here. There are lots of reasons for that. It depends on what I'm marketing that week. I think that week I might have been marketing something that was actually a class I was offering through another organization. So I can't track how much money is coming in from classes I teach with other people because their storefronts aren't integrated with my email list. But of course, I can see the increased registrations as a result of sending my newsletter. And you can see the weekly and the daily, they have dribs and drabs. So there are people who are registering for classes when they see those mentions that I showed you earlier. They're not huge numbers, but I consider it worth the trouble to send those emails, given the awareness and who knows how many people come in to register that aren't tracked by ActiveCampaign. So these are only the ones that ActiveCampaign can actually track. All right. So Judy is asking, how do you manage your time? Is it based on the highest dollar, or is the highest dollar more time consuming? And Judy, I don't know if you're talking about the emails here, but none of the emails take that much time to prepare. The one that's most time intensive is Electric Speed because it's all original content. The daily blog and the weekly blog digest, as I mentioned, they're automated. So they're pulling information off my blog on an automatic basis. I don't really touch it. I've just given it instructions about what to do and it sends automatically until I tell it to stop. So that really doesn't require any work. The online classes marketing email is a very basic message with the same template every time. And it, again, no editorial content. It takes maybe less than an hour to prepare. It's just plugging in the images for the classes and the descriptions, and that's it. And in fact, I don't even do it. My husband, who's my business partner, he actually prepares that email. So then I proof it and make sure that it's ready to go. So the other really important way that I market my stuff is through my website and my blog. And as you've already seen, the emails that I'm sending, the weekly and the daily, are based off of content. So I'm trying to interest people or give them helpful, trying to interest them in blog posts, getting them engaged with content, and then going from there, rather than making a hard sell up front. So there are lots of different ways that my blog posts feed into my business. It's not just about selling online classes. There are lots of different purposes here. So for example, my most recent blog post, How the Pandemic is Affecting Publishing, this was meant, well, there were two motivations for writing and publishing this one. The first was to set the record straight on what's happening to book publishing during the pandemic, after the New York Times published a fairly lengthy article that I didn't feel was very nuanced. And so I wouldn't say this post is my rebuttal exactly, but it's trying to give people a deeper look at what's happening rather than a superficial look. Now, at the end of that article, I mentioned I have a paid newsletter called The Hot Sheet, and that's where I publish this sort of analysis every 2 weeks. So if people really love this post, I let them know, hey, you might want to check out my paid newsletter, The Hot Sheet. So that is both helpful, but it's also a marketing effort. And then that gets sent out via email to people who subscribe. The post on the right, Beware of Chapter by Chapter Book Critiques, this was written by a guest who was also an instructor for an upcoming class on how to get better critiques. And so as you can see, the blog post ties directly into the topic of the class. And if people are really inspired by or helped by the post, that might encourage them to then sign up for the class. So I always monitor, what do registrations look like after that post goes live, and there's always a really nice bump. So I don't have the promo on that post right now, but originally when that post went live, it said, today's guest post is by writer, coach, and editor Lisa Cooper Ellison, who is teaching a class on such and such date about how to get better critiques. And so that appears at the beginning of the post, and then it appears again at the end. I also have an evergreen post that I update every couple years, if not more regularly, called How to Write a Book Proposal. Actually, it might it might be way overdue for an update, frankly, but it's something that if you go to Google and you type in how to write a book proposal, then you're very likely going to get this in the search results on the first page. And so you'll notice at the very beginning of the post, I have a note from Jane. I offer a self-study course on nonfiction book proposals. And so that's a course that people have to pay for. So if they're really motivated to get the best in-depth instruction, maybe they'll register for the course. Also, at the end of that post, I mentioned the course again, but I also mentioned that I do book proposal consulting. So this is a post I've had around for many years now, and it's just continually feeding me potential clients or students who are interested in the topic. I also have another evergreen post on query letter writing, and it performs a very similar function. It ranks really well in Google search when people are looking for information on this topic. And then I preface this post by saying I've got a class. And then, of course, last year I actually did one-on-one edits for queries, but now it's all done through the class. So that's something, again, I update that frequently, and it's an engine that just keeps working for me in the background to bring me interested students. So I see Anita is asking in the questions, how did I get so many email subscribers, which segues right into what I'm going to talk about next, which is about how my site gets new people on my email newsletter list. So, at this point, I have probably 100,000 visitors in a year. And, many of those people, they're never going to have a financial transaction with me. Like, they're not going to purchase a book. They're not going to purchase a course. They just want to find the answer to their question and they're gone. But there's some people who have a little bit more interest than that. And so on my site, I make it really clear that I have a free email newsletter, that I have a paid newsletter, that I have a book, et cetera. And if you visited my website fresh, like if you hadn't been to it in a while, you might see a pop-up that encourages you to sign up for that free newsletter, which is called Electric Speed. I'm going to show you that pop up in a second here. And then also on my online classes page, I have a sign up specifically for that at the top to receive updates about new online classes. People can enter their email, and then I mention it again at the bottom of the page. So if people get that far and they haven't found the class they wanted, they can sign up to get alerted when there's something new. I don't get a lot of people signing up through that method. I get far more like past students who are on that list rather than totally new strangers. But it's still, I would say, maybe 30 people a month. So not shabby. It's a good enough number to keep these signups on the page. So I mentioned that I've got a pop-up, and this is really what drove subscriptions to Electric Speed. So I mentioned earlier that it wasn't until maybe 2015, maybe a year earlier than that, that I finally surpassed 2,000 people on my list. So one of the things that I did, when you get that much traffic to your site, you want to be able to benefit from it in some way. And I found that a pop-up was the most direct way to do that. And I know they are super annoying to many people, but they work. And that's how I've gotten my list up to about 36,000 people. So currently you're seeing I've had a lot of pop-ups over the years, but my latest one is touting powerful digital tools for writers recommended by Jane. Stay up to date on the best digital tools for writers. And I mentioned, the frequency, it's twice monthly. I mentioned who it's for, writers and creative people. And then I also mentioned that when people subscribe, they're going to get a free list of the most powerful tools to start with. So if people input their email, they have to, it's a double opt-in. So people actually have to confirm they want to be added, and then they get sent that list of tools that I recommend. When they subscribe to any newsletter at my site, there's a thank you page that they get taken to, which I'm showing here on the right. So you wouldn't be able to find this page unless you actually subscribed. And it reminds people, or it introduces people to what I do. So it mentions my most popular resource articles. It mentions electric speed in case they signed up for something different, like the daily blog alert. It mentions my most popular book. And then I also offer links to popular free checklists for writers. So I'm trying to offer a balance here of stuff that I have to offer that they could purchase, but I'm also offering things that I know they're likely to be interested in if they have reached my site. So a combination of service and marketing. It's not just about the hard sell, it's also about helping people. Linda asks, do you find your responses and income from all these posts, blogs, and so on are I can't think of how to pronounce this. Do they run on a cycle? For example, summers are slower for responses and income and so on. There is a little bit of seasonality to it, Linda. That's true. I would say that the busiest times of year are at the early part of the year. So January, well, in fact, it begins a little earlier than that. It tends to begin in December. Maybe part of that's because of NaNoWriMo in November. That's National Novel Writing Month. So that gets a lot of people writing and thinking about publishing. And so things start to heat up after NaNoWriMo, and that heat continues through the beginning of the year. So when I worked at Writer's Digest, and this is also true for my business now, January was always the outstanding month. And summer is slower, but it's not like dramatically slower, because there's some people who, if they're on more of an academic schedule, they might only have time to really focus on writing and publishing, maybe during the summer months when things are a little bit slower. So, but it's true. I think July and August do tend to be like, if I had to map the revenue, that's probably the lowest time of year. Okay. So moving on, obviously I also have the Sunday business sermons that I do, and this is marketing. I'm trying to show you my style, the way that I teach, show you what I do for free, and maybe that will convince you that if you pay for a class, imagine the value you will get if you're actually paying me money when you see what I offer you for free. But it's also of service to the community, and it's part of my mission of transparency about how freelance writing works, how entrepreneurship works in writing and publishing, how the money works, how you can be successful. So I try to remove all of the taboos surrounding money and how it works, and in an effort so everyone can be successful with their business. Now notice what I have not mentioned yet, which is social media, and that merits a drink of water. Now, before I get into the social media piece, which for me is far less important than the email, it's far less important than the website and the blog, but it has its role, but it's not a hard sales role. Before I get to that, though, I'm going to take a look at the questions we have here. Diana asks, for security purposes, do you prefer a double opt-in or a CAPTCHA on your form, or do you use both? And she says, I know some people don't recommend them because there are more steps in the sign-up process. So I use both. And for those who don't know what those terms mean, I'm going to describe them. So a double opt-in for an email newsletter is when you mandate that people confirm via email that they want to be signed up to your list. So it's not just enough that they typed in their email address and click subscribe. They don't get on your list until they actually confirm through an email that, yes, they want to be subscribed. I do really strongly recommend that, just because it keeps a lot of bad actors off your list. I won't go into detail about what that means, but just trust me, there are people who will get on your list who will never open an email, and they're just taking up space, and you're paying for those names, and you don't want that. You also want people who are willing to click, who can actually find your email in their email software, and they're capable of clicking on it. So that also, it just ensures that your emails aren't going out somewhere into a black hole, that they're actually reaching the person who wants to receive it. The other piece of that, the CAPTCHA, most email marketing service platforms, if you're building a form or if you have a WordPress site, It's usually pretty straightforward to add a CAPTCHA. Sometimes they're invisible. Sometimes they require you to check a box. Sometimes you have to click on all of the stoplights, in a grid, those annoying things. But that also cuts down on bad people getting onto your list. So I do use both. I would recommend both. It just keeps a cleaner list, and you only want names that are actually, going to be engaged, so that it just helps you have a stronger list from the get-go. Anita asks, as a new writer, how do you get your first subscribers? It's a good, this is like the, I know always the catch-22 for folks. If email is the strongest marketing tool or the best marketing tool, how do you have that in place, let's say for your first book? And the honest truth is you're probably not going to have it in place, at least not in a strong place, until you actually have some work out on the market. Now, there are some creative ways to build up before you launch, but it's not, sometimes those efforts work, sometimes they don't. And you would usually have to be producing something that would interest people, like a serialization or articles or essays or blog posts, short stories, social media activity. You would have to be doing something that would attract attention and get people curious about what you're going to do next. So, and the more relevant that content or activity is to what's going to be in your book, or the reason you want people on your list, obviously the better. So the three places you start is on your own website. That's how most of my people get on my list, 95%. And it helps, obviously, that I blog, and that brings me a lot of traffic, and that's how people get on the list. If you're not blogging, then you might not get that much traffic to your site. So you might remind people on social media that you've got an email newsletter and here's where they can sign up. Also in your books, once you've got books coming out and you're publishing, if you're self-publishing, you can put that email sign up right in the front or in the back or in multiple places. If you're traditional publishing, it's a little bit tougher. Your publisher's probably not going to let you put an email newsletter sign up in the front of the book. And I'm talking about ebook here. But you can definitely make sure your email newsletter sign up is prominent on your site, and make sure that your author website is mentioned in your bio. And you can mention in your bio, if you like, that you have an email newsletter with great stuff. So definitely talk with your publisher about that. There are lots of clever ways. And they want you to grow your list too. It helps them if you've got a strong email list. I do know some writers who will run giveaways, particularly on social media. They'll give away books, they'll give away gift cards in order to get people on their list. And I don't think it's a bad idea, but just realize that that can attract a lower quality sort of name. So, those people might fall off the list very quickly if all they were interested in was this freebie that you had to offer. But it's not a bad idea. You just have to, you're making some sort of a compromise there. There are also, in the independent author community and self-publishing, there are a lot of list swaps and people who will, market each other on each other's email newsletter list. And those sorts of activities can also lead to list growth in the long term. So those are a few places to consider beginning. Marge asks, if I acquire new email subscribers from the registration lists of events hosted by another person or organization, and if so, how do you manage that? I don't. If I were going to do that, let's say I recently taught a class with a New Jersey-based writing group, and they took care of all of the registrations. And I think there were maybe 100 people in that class, maybe a little more. So not an insignificant number. If I wanted those people on my email list, there are two things that I would have to do. One, I could either make a call during my presentation for people to sign up. So usually you do that at the end. You let people know you've got the newsletter. If you want to be a little bit, I don't want to say mean exactly, but you could require people to sign up for your email newsletter if they're to get, let's say, the slide pack from the presentation. I would not do that, but I know some presenters who will. You have to go sign up to get the goodies. Or you could try and collaborate with the organization so that when people register, there's a checkbox when they register. Do you want to receive emails from the presenter? And you have to make it clear what this is, like that you're joining a marketing list. So you could work on having that language in the registration form. And a lot of organizations already have a checkbox like that for their own marketing list. So, what people end up doing is they might check one, but not both. In any event, it's going to depend on the situation. I think the best thing to do in most cases is to simply make a really strong call at the end of your presentation, give people the link and let them know the benefit of signing up for your newsletter. And try not to make it punitive. Like you only get the presentation slides if you sign up, which can be a little off-putting. All right. As Cindy asks, or she says, I always have great recommendations in my emails. Thank you. How much time do you spend doing the research here, and is it intentional? So I subscribe to probably more than 100 other email newsletters myself. Some of that is because of the reporting I do. I have to stay up to date. I have to know what's happening. Some of it is strictly research for electric speed and finding new digital tools. So I'm trying to cast as broad a net as possible to be getting recommendations from very diverse and dynamic places. And anytime I see something of interest, I copy and paste it into a Notion note or Evernote or whatever your note-taking tool might be. But I have a Notion note that's just about tools that I might mention in my newsletter. And when I'm ready to write electric speed, I go into that file and I look at what I've taken note of in the last couple of weeks. So that saves me a lot of time. I'm not going back through countless emails trying to find that recommendation from a week ago. I just keep a really nice list of things that I might want to discuss. So it's become part of my daily work process. David asks a stellar question, which is what percentage of my 36,000 subscribers are active, or what is an appropriate turnover rate? So my open rate currently on that list is around 30%. So if you want to count open rates as active, 30% are active. And one of the reasons I moved from MailChimp to ActiveCampaign is because it was really hard for me to get rid of the dead weight on that list using MailChimp's tools. And so now that I've been on ActiveCampaign for about a month, I'm starting to see where the dead weight is on that list. And probably in another 3 months' time, I'm going to be able to trim away that dead weight and I'm going to have a much healthier list. Because that list has been built for 10 years, I cannot even begin to tell you how much dead weight is there. So I would imagine that once I get it down to people who really want to receive it, they're opening it, they're engaging with it, it could easily be half the size. So certainly when advertisers are placing sponsorships, they know what the open rate is because that's part of the information I give people. I also tell them the click rate, which is between 5 and 10%. So what will happen when I do that is the list might be smaller, but the open rate is going to skyrocket. So hopefully people won't be scared when they see that the number of subscribers have gone down, because the truth is those subscribers have been incommunicado for quite some time. As far as an appropriate turnover, it's going to vary a lot by industry, but I would say that, if I'm not actively getting people on the list, it would dwindle. Like it would probably dwindle by 100 a month, maybe 200 a month. So if I'm not actively replacing those people, the list would get smaller. But that turnover rate, the churn it's so variable. But that's what my turnover rate is, if you want an idea. Okay, so I see that the questions are piling up. I want to make sure that I get through some of my key material, and then I'll go back to the questions. So social media. As I said, I don't really use social media as a hard sell. I use it more for brand awareness, to help people, to be of service. I find that when I do try a hard sell on social, for the most part, it's not terribly effective. It's definitely like, it's like if my email list is 100% effective, social media would be like 2% effective. It's so ineffective as to not be worth the effort to make the hard sell. And maybe, I need to improve my tactics or my strategy. I don't know, but I don't want to. Like I do enough on the email and the website that I feel like the pressure's off on social. So if it happens, great. If not, it's fine. So I have a Facebook group called The Business of Being a Writer. It's a private group. I actually do not market any of my classes. I do not post my blog stuff here. I do not self-promote in this group. It is just to help people and to answer questions. And I think this is just really essential for who I am and serving the mission of being in the writing community. And I also, if other people self-promote in the group, I delete it. It's a strictly no promotion zone. I also have Instagram, where I do a little bit more promotion than I do on Facebook. My Instagram account is a little bit more personal than what you might find from me on Twitter or Facebook. Generally speaking, I have like more personal photos. I've got some cat photos. I share stuff from my husband. But every once in a while, I'll have a post that markets an upcoming class, and it's all tip-based. So I offer 3, 4, or 5 tips that are drawn from the class or about that topic. And then I mention, hey, there's a class coming up, link in the bio if you want to join it. I think of the social media sites that I use, Instagram has probably been most effective for that kind of marketing. Because I don't have a sufficient number of followers, I would have to get to 10,000 followers in order to be able to use some of the tools Instagram offers for getting people to, I think it's called the swipe up, in order to actually make a purchase kind of directly from Instagram. But, I think the method I'm using for now is fine, and I feel no pressure to increase my follower count for that functionality. I use YouTube to store the interviews and conversations I have with folks in the community. So podcast appearances, festival appearances, conferences that record, online classes that are free. All of that goes onto YouTube, and I have a playlist called Interviews with Jane where I save all of that. Most of it, I don't host these. It's other people who are hosting, but I try to keep it very tidy and helpful for people who might be trying to get a sense of who I am and what I do. And then I've also recently started using Clubhouse, which is a drop-in audio chat app. Right now, I believe it's only available for iPhone users, unless they had some big announcement lately that it's now on Android. I think it's just Mac or iPhone, Mac people for now. But I really like this forum for just, especially during the pandemic when I'm not out at conferences and doing panels. It's just a really great way to talk with people in real time and have some engagement, and be of service. And I think for me, if it has a hard marketing function, it's really maybe to make people aware of my paid newsletter, the Hot Sheet, since I'm talking about some pretty hardcore business issues on Clubhouse. All right, so now we've gotten to the end, and I'm actually going to go back just maybe one slide. I realized I forgot to include Twitter in here, and it's probably because Twitter is the most useless social media platform, in my opinion, for marketing anything. But it's wonderful for conversations and for relationships. So it's not that I don't like it or don't use it. I have probably my biggest following there. But I just, I have to force myself sometimes to mention, like, sign up for this, or I'm doing that. But I like the conversations there. And I think when people see my Twitter account and they see my activity, and maybe they don't know me that well yet, I think it helps with trust. It shows that I'm not some sort of fly by night. I might actually know what I'm talking about. I've got the blue check mark for what that's worth. So it's just, it's just to reinforce other things that I'm doing and offer reassurances that I'm a real person. All right, so I'm going to hop over here to the end. My cat has joined me for the Q&A. And let me get into the questions here. Okay. Laura asks, what are the search terms for finding the independent author publishing communities, or what are some of the names of some? I would take a look at the Alliance of Independent Authors, which is an international organization with strong UK and US presence. They have Facebook groups that are related. There's also Mark Dawson and the Self-Publishing Formula podcast. There's Joanna Penn. There's a Create If writing hosted by Kristen Oliphant, which is a really active and helpful Facebook group and blog and podcast. So that's Create If writing. And then this would be more of a small publisher, but there are lots of self-publishers that join it. The Independent Book Publishers Association, the IBPA, is quite popular in the self-publishing community. It's definitely for people who are pretty well established. You'll find some beginners there, but some of the people in that group are small presses. But some of their challenges are the same as self-published author challenges. So I hope that provides you a starting point. Tricia says, I'm launching my first book in August. I currently have a serialized short story up on Amazon connected to the series that's available for free this week. And I'm advertising my website, my sign-up opportunity at the front of that short story. I'd like to begin offering a newsletter blog with short bits about the craft of writing and what blog platform do I recommend. And her website currently is through Wix. And she's not sure that Wix's blog element is the best one, and I would agree with that. I mean, if you didn't already have a site, I would say WordPress, but it doesn't make sense to start a blog on a separate site from your author website. You want everything under one umbrella. So you might be stuck with Wix unless you're willing to go to a different platform. I think WordPress is better search engine optimized. I think it offers you more power over the long term. So I would consider if now might be a time to switch, since you're maybe earlier in your career, if you're launching your first book, and it won't be painful to make that switch. It's not that Wix is terrible, but if you are interested in blogging, I don't know that you want to stay there. So let's see. Yeah, so if you really feel like you want to operate in two different places, then go to WordPress, but it's just really counter to the advice that I give to keep everything under one umbrella. Let's see here. Evelyn asks, do you think you sacrifice time you might better spend writing another book when you write so many other things like blogs and newsletters? Well, I think my dirty little secret is I'm not really consumed with writing books, and I don't like writing them. I actually like writing short things. I like writing newsletters. I like writing blogs. That's where I think I shine. So the strategy that you're seeing here is not a compromise for me. It is what I love. Doing a book really interferes with my life. It slows down my business, it stresses me out. It's just the energy level, the time required is ginormous. And it pays less well, frankly. So what and I know that it's always risky to admit this because obviously many of the people I'm talking to right now want to write books. They don't want to write short things. But maybe I say that as a bit of encouragement that if you're a writer, I think it's possible to enjoy writing just about anything if you can see how it fits into the bigger picture. I mean, I write books and it's not that terrible. And I do like writing them, but it's just my business setup doesn't allow for it easily. So you just have to figure out the structure that's going to work for you and pick the things that you can write with some semblance of joy. And I'm not suggesting that people both blog and do all the newsletters that I do. That would be overkill. But I do think it's very possible to write a brief newsletter and and find that it's planting the seeds for larger, bigger, more important works later. So my note from Jane that appears at the beginning of every Electric Speed is really a thought that I have that I would like to develop into a longer essay. And maybe that essay is a chapter in a book that will come out in 5 years. So I'm planting a lot of seeds, and I like having many small bets out there rather than investing hundreds or thousands of hours in a book. Okay. Sheila says, so much of book marketing these days seems to be centered on freebies, giveaways, discounts, lead magnets, free classes like this one. Does this devalue books in some way, and is there an alternative? So this is kind of goes to the question that all writers are concerned about, which is the devaluing piece, but also often the request that people do things for exposure rather than for money. And I don't think it devalues books, because it's all about the larger strategy that you have and how that fits into that strategy. So traditional publishers offer discounts and promos on books all the time for free, for 99 cents. And you have to decide when is the right time to do it, and how is this going to benefit you in the future? How is this going to help you sell something in the future? You just don't do it forever or indefinitely without any next step. So every publisher, every author, every business has a marketing funnel, to use a technical term. And at the top of the marketing funnel is how you get people in the door. And the easiest way to get people in the door is with something that's free. Now, you can offer something really cheap, but why not, if it's really, really cheap, why not just say, what can I offer for free to make it easy? And then you bring people in the door, and then some percentage of them are going to be willing to pay. And then some of them, if they get to the bottom of the funnel, are going to be really, really, really eager to pay you for like the exclusive thing that no one else is going to get, for the really personal experience, or for the signed copy or book plate. So you have to think about this as on a spectrum. It's not free that devalues the book. It's free that gets people in the door and gets them to invest in something. You can find this model everywhere, across every business, every industry. Free samples at the grocery store. I don't think giving free samples of cheese is devaluing the cheese. It's just getting people interested in buying the entire cheese. So that's what we're talking about here. Now, I do think there are some little sectors that are under a lot of pressure. So like in the romance community, there's just you can see that there can be a real race to the bottom in terms of pricing, because the competition is so fierce. But I don't think this is about devaluing the book as much as how many people are on the field trying to play and trying to get a piece of the pie. And that's a conversation for another day. All right. Julie says, how confident can you be about who's opening your newsletter, since they could have previews set and I'm not sure if that's recorded as opening? Do you periodically contact non-openers to check? It's a great question, and I do think there is some percentage of people who aren't being recorded as opening, and you're never going to know for sure. So you can at least know that you've got the lowest open, like the open rate you're seeing is as low as it gets. So the other thing, though, is that people click. And as soon as people click in an email, it's recorded as an open, even if it wasn't recognized as an open before. So if you're sending emails for a year and you're recording no opens and no clicks, that sounds like a pretty unengaged person. You might want to consider letting them go. Now, a lot of email marketing providers will give you the option to try and re-engage those people, like by sending the email that you suggest, Julie, contact, saying, do you want to stay on this list? We've noticed you haven't, opened or clicked. Click here if you want to stay on the list. So sure, you can do that. There is no harm in doing it. But you're absolutely right that the open rates aren't an absolutely true figure. and David's wondering if there's any method to discover who is opening and how often. I mean, if people are blocking the ability to know, then there's no way other than people actually clicking. So definitely the email marketing service providers can tell the clicks for sure. So the only way to know is to try and entice people to click the email. Selima asks, how do you trim dead weight from an email newsletter list? Do you notify those who don't open and ask if they want to stay on it? So you can do that. I'm personally not planning to do that. I'm just going to lop people off. And I don't even necessarily have a rationale to explain this other than I know my list. Like, it's old. The electric speed list is very old, and it needs to be better managed, which is why I made this switch to the new marketing service. So I'm just going to take time to study the behavior. I'm going to look at, the time or the date that people joined. If they joined in 2013 and they haven't opened anything in 6 months or clicked, I'm going to feel pretty safe taking them off. But if you want to be super, super careful, then you should send that email just to confirm people want to stay on. Donna says, I often get a blogger soliciting me to pay to blog on one of my blogs. Have you ever been paid for a guest blog on your blog? So I think this is where you get brands or companies or whomever out in the world who they want to get content on your site and so that you'll link to something. And I do not do that, and I don't recommend that you do it either. It's a bad idea, as Nate rightly mentions in the comments there of the Q&A. Jean asks, is your Instagram account private? No, it's public. Anything that I post there, I would be happy to have it appear in any newspaper. That's my philosophy when I'm making any sort of public post. So no, and if you're using social media to market, it's really hard to do if you've got the accounts marked as private. Jean also asks what platforms I use to share recent publications. So if it's something really important to me, I'm going to use all the platforms to share that: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And then I'm going to mention it prominently, probably on my website and then in my newsletters. Nate's suggesting for the independent publisher community, there was a question a while back about if you're trying to look at the self-publishing community and find the keywords or the forums or the communities. He's suggesting 20 books to 50K, which is a wonderful suggestion. Thank you. So 20 books to 50K is an organization that runs events. They have a Facebook group. It's a really big organization. And I think I wonder if they even have local chapters. I think they might. But in any event, that's another one to take a look at. Diana asks how often I recommend blogging, like a minimum blogging frequency, if you want to be effective. And this is such a hard question to answer because there's just the context really matters and what your goals are really matter. My husband has a very inactive blog that has one stellar blog post that he made in 2015 that continues to get him 500 visits a month, I think. He hasn't updated it. He rarely posts anything new to this site, but that blog post keeps going and going and going and going because it's so valuable and because it's so unique. So like, if you can hit it out of the park with a handful of blog posts, you might not have to blog more than once a year if it achieves your goals. But I would say on average, if you're in the space to do what I've done, my standard was 4 to 5 times a week in my early years. So this would have been around 2008 to 2011. And then, recently, now that I'm established, I can pull back on that. So for the last 5 years, it's maybe twice a week, or maybe 3 or 4 times a week if it's a really hopping week. But I have a lot of guests, so this isn't stuff that I'm writing. It's guests who are appearing on my site. Let's see. Diana asks, what do I think makes for engaging newsletter content? Is it like I mentioned that you include a personal story as well as delivering interesting content? What length is ideal? Um, again, there's so much that the answer is it depends. It depends on your audience, what they've come to expect from you. But I will say that I noticed so much more engagement and response when I started doing two things in Electric Speed. So Electric Speed started strictly as digital tool recommendations. And I really didn't put much else in the newsletter other than 1, 2, 3, 4, here they are, goodbye. It wasn't terribly personal. As soon as I started opening it with a more personal note, which isn't very long, like sometimes it's just maybe a couple hundred words, if that. The longest one might be 400 words. I keep it pretty brief. Once I started adding that personal note at the front, and then having a reader engagement section toward the end, it's been such a much better experience. So the reader engagement part at the end is where I say, it's your turn to share with me the digital tools or the things that's, sometimes it's not digital at all. I've asked people to share their favorite pens, pencils, journals. Journals was a really popular one for people to tell me about. Everyone wanted to tell me about the paper journal they use in my digital tools newsletter, which was delightful. So every 2 weeks I come up with something that I'm either curious about, I'm curious what people are using, or I'm trying to find out, stuff to try. Like I was looking for black tea. I had to switch from coffee to tea, and I didn't know what the best black teas were. I was struggling with this, and I got so many wonderful recommendations on that question. So in any event, it keeps people clicking and responding. It informs me and informs my readers, because readers are curious about each other and they have fabulous ideas, often better ideas than I have. So, I'm able to do that, the reader engagement piece, because my list is of a significant size now. If I had a really tiny list, that wouldn't work. So you might not be able to start with that. But once you get up to a couple thousand, I think you can start to give it a try. I don't think email newsletters necessarily have to stay short. I subscribe to some that would take me 15 minutes to read from beginning to end. It's just really about what are the expectations you're setting, and what are you delivering? If it's something people want, they will stick around, they will save the email, they will read it later. For my email marketing strategy, it's not imperative that people act on it right away. I'm fine if they save it and read it in a couple weeks. Okay. We're coming up at the top of the hour, and I can see I'm not going to have time to answer all the questions, and I apologize for that. So I'm just seeing if there's any questions that I might end on that would further enlighten everyone on the topic. A quick answer: is my newsletter produced through my website? No, I produce it through ActiveCampaign, so it's separate from my website. Let's see. Just scanning, give me a moment. Maybe I'll end with Autumn's question about whether I also do creative writing, to maybe reinforce something I mentioned earlier. She's wondering what % of my time do I spend on my creative work versus my business. And I'm somewhat unique in that my business is my creative work. So my paid newsletter, The Hot Sheet, reports on the industry, and that's the favorite part of my work. I put a lot of creative energy into that. It's growing a body of work that I think is going to be valuable over many years. And then Electric Speed, my free newsletter, in that opening note, this is a creative exercise. I'm trying to think of new and fresh ways to express some often very old and timeless principles about success and failure and creativity, and what keeps you going when all you're getting is rejections. So, I like that challenge, and it does it feeds me, and I feel like I've done something substantial when I complete one of those notes and send out an electric speed, and then I get that immediate gratification of people responding to it within 24 hours. So I'm kind of addicted to that. As I'm addicted to that because I'm a blogger as well, and I'm on social media. So getting that immediate audience feedback is so invaluable, and inspiring. And also my readers changed my thinking about a lot of things. So it's really hard to separate out the time I spend on things that are just creative writing and things that are just business, since they've really meshed. But there are some things like personal essays and some little bits of creative nonfiction that I do. And when I tried to separate that out a couple years ago from my business, I kind of failed at it. I just wasn't able to make time for it. So personally, if I'm going to make progress on something, I have to find a way to make the creative practice part of what I'm doing, strategically, to earn my living, to entertain, to keep myself entertained. So I know that part of the message, for those of you who've maybe been following me for many years now, you might know that I often talk about the tension between art and business, and then it can be a very productive tension. And so that's really what I'm saying here. I think finding a way to put the art into what I do, that's a pleasure. That's part of what makes my business enjoyable. So on that note, I'll stop the share here. And thank you for joining me. I'm going to have another Sunday sermon in a month's time where I'm going to talk more about email. I know there were a lot of questions that came through asking really about the particulars of how email goes to spam or welcome sequences, things of that nature. So I'll be happy to go more in depth on the email side in next week's session when I talk about switching from MailChimp to ActiveCampaign, what that's allowed me to do, and how my thoughts on email have changed over the years. So thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. Bye-bye.